Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this presentation on managing your learning style during COVID-19. Today, we have Sharon Lobdell, the Tutoring Services Coordinator, Judith Walker, the Disability Services Coordinator, and myself, Kathy Sider, the Disability Services Testing Center and Alternative Formatting Coordinator. At any time during today's live presentation, do not hesitate to ask questions or add comments by using the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to get us started. Take it away, Sharon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on what is a very rainy morning outside. But hopefully we can kind of put a little bit more light on helping our students and maybe even ourselves learn a little bit more about what our own personal learning styles are and what the students' learning styles are like. So Kathy, if you want to click to the next slide.
Yes.
A lot of people ask, well, what does it matter? Well, so what? I don't know what my learning style is. Well, knowing your learning style is kind of one of the key pieces of understanding the foundation of your study skills. As it says here, if you know what kind of a learner you are, you can do better on tests because you change your study habits to better match your personal learning style. Kind of think of it this way, if you're someone that's a visual learner, and we'll just explain what these styles are throughout the presentation, but if you're someone who does better when you read something, you're probably not going to have as much of a successful attempt if you have an instructor who just sits there and talks and talks and talks. You need that visual piece. We'll go over a little bit more as the presentation goes on, the different kinds of styles and how you can kind of even have a hybrid. Most of us will have one learning style that will be a dominant, but it's not uncommon for someone to have 2 or 3 styles. And a lot of it's going to depend on what the course is. But again, we're going to go ahead and kind of talk about that a little bit more. If you'd like to find out some more information, you'll see a link here on the screen. It really is a nice in-depth conversation on how, what are learning styles? What are some tips that you can best use? And we'll also be talking about some tips as we go through the presentation. So you can go back and check this when you have some time. I really think, it's a short read, but a very informative one. Kathy? So what is your learning style? An auditory learner, auditory, visual, and tactile are the 3 basic styles. Kind of like, do you do better hearing it, seeing it, or doing it? So if you're dealing with someone that's an auditory learner, as it says, they may struggle to understand a chapter they've read, but they experience a full understanding as they listen to the class lecture. It's kind of like someone who always says, well, if I can get a tape or if I can tape your lecture, I do better. A lot of students need to have that auditory piece with them as they're going back over their notes, reading back through their test chapters, different ways of making sure that they can have the best possible environment. Auditory learners also will be able to kind of get the true meaning out of someone's words by just listening to signals in the way they talk. How pitch can really interfere with how we perceive something. Like someone says, yeah, I really believe you. You hear the words, but the intonation gives you a definitely different message with that. Sometimes we've all done this when we're memorizing a phone number. You kind of sing it, 8675309, and it helps you because you put that little auditory connection to it. You remember it rather than going 867. You don't get the benefit from that. Auditory learners are also good at writing responses to lectures that they've heard, because by having that auditory piece, they can go, they're kind of making transcriptions. They're also very good at oral exams. That's why you're going to find auditory learners are very good at learning languages. Because if you think about it, when we learn our languages, we have the written piece, you get tested, but you also have the big auditory piece. If we don't learn how to repeat the language, how to speak the language, we're not going to learn the language. Auditory learners make up about 20% of the population. So one thing I've always told students, if you can do it, ask your instructors first, but tape and listen to your lectures. That was indispensable for me when I was in grad school. I would tape my lectures and I was driving 45 minutes twice a week. I was a captive hostage in my car. I listened to the tapes. So it gave me that extra time to hear the lecture again. And as we all know, The more we repeat something, the more we're exposed to it. It goes from just being memorization to where you actually learn the material. Repetitious learning is the key of learning, so it fits in nicely. Kathy? If you look, the first one, it's I think this is one of the most critical pieces to remember though. It is believed that when an auditory verbal learner reads, it is almost impossible for the learner to comprehend anything without sound in the background. In these situations, listening to music or having different sounds in the background help them learn better. That was one thing I always drove my mother crazy when I was in school. I would have to have the TV going or I was listening to music. I couldn't tell you what was on TV, but I heard sound. Other people need just almost a sterilely clean, silent environment to study. Those are not your auditory. Those are going to be more visual people. You need to almost have like white noise. Auditory learners also need to be able to hear what is being said in order to understand. So if you tell them, walk into the room, sit down, open your book, and read page 5, versus handing them a sheet with those exact same instructions as they walk through the door, people are going to do better with the verbal cues that they were presented with. You also want to sit, make sure you sit down. If you're an auditory learner and you want to make sure you get everything, sit in front of the room. If it's a large lecture hall and you're in that back row, you're not going to get every auditory cue that you really need to find, that you need to be exposed to. So put yourself into a good environment in the classroom. Auditory learners are good at storytelling. They're the problem solvers. Their speech patterns include phrases like, I hear you, that clicks, I get it. It's ringing a bell. Well, we've all known people who have had responses like that. The reason we say, I hear you, it clicks. If you look at that, you're using verbal-oriented terms. Learners will also move their lips or talk to themselves. If you're an auditory learner, you might sit there as you're reading and you're just memorizing. It's like, I'm reading through this, I'm reading through this. And it's okay. And, they say we all grow this, but if it's something that helps you learn better, go ahead and do it. Reread your notes and assignments out loud, or explain your notes to your peers or other auditory learners. The best way you can tell that you've learned something is if you can sit down with someone who has absolutely little or no idea what the class is and teach them a little bit about it. And they can walk away. They may not understand the entire process, but they're going to walk away with a better understanding after your conversation of what your class is about. If you can do that, then you've learned because you've been able to annotate your learning process. And being an auditory learner helps you get to that point. Kathy? Moving on to our next one, visual learners. You'll see that where auditory was about 20%, visual is about 65% of all learners. They're the ones that like the printed instructions. They're the ones that you can give a sheet to with multiple steps, and they'll be able to go through and tick each one off and do whatever is expected of them. They're the students that will thrive in a classroom where you can sit up there and you walk in there and you just start writing and writing and writing. They'll get that. It's more comfortable for them to have that actual tangibly written down words, diagrams, charts, whatever it might be, but there's a visual component to it. It gives them an instinctive sense of balance and alignment. You're also going to find those students are the best organized. They're the ones who are going to have the books, notebooks. They're going to have copious to-do lists. Everything is going to be color-coded, but there is all an underlying visual thread that ties it together. Visual learners will take some of the most detailed notes. I've seen students that have come in and they've color-coded their notebooks, and the red ones are for this lecture and the blue ones are for the Canvas. They really make a beautiful notebook, if you can say that about notebooks, but it's something that really is very in-depth. Visual learners get the most out of using flashcards and colors. I just mentioned colors a big thing. I'm a big advocate in college of using flashcards. Let's face it, most of us are exposed to flashcards when we're kindergarten, early math classes in elementary school. It still helps because you can triage the learning. as you're going through and you're doing the reading, you can figure out, okay, I have this information here. You create a stack that I have to work on. You master that stack and you merge them together. And by constantly, again, the repetitious learning, you learn the material much more in depth. Charts and other visual representations also help the visual learner. As I mentioned a moment ago, the more you can diagram out information, the more you can actually show different ways of representing the information, the better they're going to understand that. Kathy? Now here's our third piece, the tactile and kinesthetic. They're the ones that learn by doing. You're going to find people who are musicians, chefs, even some people that are in the natural sciences, because think of a chemistry class, if you're a chemist. Yes, you have to understand the equations and understand what the chemicals are, but a lot of that is the mixing, knowing how to do things, being able to look at something and say, oh, it's turning green, I have to make sure I add something. So you're doing a lot with your hands. They're not so much the ones that want to learn by reading or listening. They're the doers. They, as I said a moment ago, they prefer labs, flashcards, group projects. The tactile kinesthetic learner usually does well in such things as chemistry experiments, sports, arts, acting. Think of anyone, if you've ever had an acting class or a speech class with someone who's very dramatic, they really get into the actual art of doing it. It is common, though, for kinesthetic learners to focus on two different things at the same time. They'll remember things by going back in their minds to what they were doing. I remember that when I was first reading that first chapter of my chem book, I was watching this movie, and I thought it was weird as I was reading it, and they can create a story almost by balancing out the two equations, but being able to make those connections, again, helps them do this. They also have very high hand-eye coordination and very quick receptors. They're the ones that are going to use phrases such as, yeah, I can see myself doing that. And you know what? It's starting to really come alive to me. I really understand that. If you're a faculty member, one thing you're going to want to do when you're dealing with any of these learners is create an environment where you have an authentic problem-solving situation. Don't just do lectures, multiple choice. Do a set number of homework problems. You're going to want to do things that are authentically going to address the learning, especially now in our virtual format. You could get students involved in the classroom. You could do small group breakouts. You have people move around in the classroom. We don't have that option now. So how can we take that theme and reconstruct it in a Zoom classroom, in a Google Meet, or if there's other ways of the connections are happening, what do you make that happen? Just find different ways of doing it. Maybe breakout rooms. It may be, polls. It may be ways of just stimulating people. Polls. Kathy, I think we're going to go for our first poll here. So I know we've only talked about the first three, but based on that information, which kind of a learner do you think you are? Visual, tactile, auditory, verbal? Let's see. Give it another minute or so here. All right, well, I think we have our participants all here. So I have majority of auditory and visual. Okay, thank you, Kathy. And just in case we didn't mention it, this is being recorded, so it will be available at a point on the CAPS webpage. And if you can't find it on there, just reach out to one of us and we will help you find it. You want to go back and review it. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. So some of the other ones, and Initially, when they started breaking down and describing learning styles, you had the 3 styles that I just spoke of. But then as further research took place, different styles came out of the discussion and research. So diverging, feeling and watching. These are the very sensitive people that can look at things from 2 perspectives. They're the watchers. They will sit there and they will watch what's going on. They like to use their imagination. As it says here, the style is called diverging because these people perform better in situations that require idea generations. They're the brainstormers. Been in a group meeting and you've got some people that just sit down there and it's almost like when you give them that option, they thrive. Because have we ever thought of doing this? Why don't we look at this? Well, why don't we change this from this? They're the ones that are just constantly generating new ideas. They also have a broad cultural interest and they're the information gatherers because they want to have as many resources as possible for them to use as they're making their decisions. Diverging leaders learners are really interested in people. They tend to be very imaginative and emotional, and they have a very strong tie to the arts. They're the ones that really thrive in group work, and they have an open mind. One key thing with a diverging leader, they don't have any objections to receiving personal feedback. Sometimes when even ourselves or we're in a group meeting, it can be hard to take personal feedback because sometimes we may see it as a shortcoming or, oh, I didn't do something right, I failed. But they realize by getting that feedback, they take the opposite tone with it. I get this feedback and it's going to help me grow and develop. So they take the positive spin on it, which is the best way probably for all of us to take any kind of a feedback situation. Kathy? Assimilating, watching and thinking. Anyone who is a fan of the Star Trek series Next Gen will understand, probably have heard the word assimilating if you know who the Borg are. They're the watchers and they're thinkers. They're very concise, they're very logical. They're the ones who really, they don't have a lot of room for interpretation. They're the mathematicians and the science people, again, that want very cut and dry. They're the engineers. They need good, clear explanations rather than any kind of a practical opportunity. They have a wide range of understanding information, and they organize as best as they can in a very clear and logical way of doing it. People that are assimilating learners are less focused on people, again, and they're more interested in ideas and the concepts. They're more logically sound theories, again, engineering comes to mind again, than approaches based on practical value. This learning style is important for effectiveness in information and science careers. In formal learning setting, people with this style prefer reading, lecture, exploring analytical models, and having time to think things through. They like to, let me read this, digest a little bit, and I'll get back to you tomorrow about it. They need to have time to just process all the data. Think of it kind of like they're the computer and they have to run all the research first before they can spit out an answer. Kathy? Converging, doing and thinking. People with a converging learning style can solve problems and will use their learning to find solutions to practical issues. They're the technical people and they're less concerned with people and interpersonal aspects. I have a friend who is a whiz at building computers and can sit there and know, it's like, okay, well, I want to build this. I need to have this kind of a motherboard and I put this memory chip in here and they just know this. And they have their little lingo that they talk and I'm just sitting here going, okay, that's fine. You're talking your language, but they know what they're doing. They may not be the most social creatures, but the expertise they bring to the situation is really, it doesn't matter that they're the social people. They get it done when they need to get it done. People with a converging learning style are also very attracted to technical tasks again, and not so much the social or interpersonal. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you're probably not going to see a converging learner go into a social work environment. You're going to see them be a chemist, software engineer, electrical engineer. So, I mean, think about that when you're dealing with your students as well, if you're a faculty member. understand that they have a learning need that needs to be met, and help them learn how to tap that. And in the beginning, they may not understand what their style is. So by giving them some of the tools to play with, it's going to allow them to start figuring out what track of their academic journey they want to get onto. People with converging styles also like to play around with new ideas. They love new toys. Think about some of the pictures we've seen on our campus with the engineering students again. And I know I use engineering a lot, but it's a prime example, that are working on like the Baja car and some of the lab work. Look at their faces. They're like kids in a candy store. You can just see it's like, I love what I'm doing here. They're doing it. Probably if you went and looked at a culinary class next door at Henry Ford, you're going to see the chefs in training. They're just doing it. They're creating with their hands. Kathy? Accommodating is doing and feeling. Accommodating learning style is very hands-on, and it's intuition. It says here, the big thing with them, they're gut instinct people. I'm not sure about this, but you know what? I think this might be the right approach to take. I'm gonna go with this. They're using their skills, they're using background expertise, information that they've gathered over, the class, the semester, life, whatever it takes, but whatever their database is. And they're going to use all this data pulled together to guide their action. People with an accommodating learning style will tend to rely on others for information and carry out their own analysis. They're the ones that are going to be great group members, but they're not going to be the ones leading the charge. We're going to wait till the Kathys and Sharons or whomever else is in the group come back and say, okay, Judy, you do this. Mike, you do this. They're going to be the guides, and they'll very gladly take that mantle and run with it, but they're not going to be the ones that start running with the flag on their own. And you can see there's a lot more to learn about the learning styles than what we have on these slides. So if you have an opportunity, I've included the information here on the bottom. Check this out. It's very important. I have students that I work with take the test. I have my tutors know about their own learning styles. They'll work with their students that they're working with. There's an assessment that I give them to give the students. And even as faculty members, maybe it's not a bad idea, faculty and staff to kind of self-check, because even though we're not learning, it's always good to know how we're approaching a situation and see what kind of adjustments we might want to make in how we're doing things. Kathy? So as I mentioned in the beginning, your learning style is your strength. You want to go with it whenever you can. A lot of times, a student will get into a class and they just will not be a good match with the faculty person. For whatever reason, again, maybe the faculty person is a talker and the student needs more of a written approach, whatever the case might be. You always want to get one that matches your environment, matches how you best learn. You won't be able to do that with every single opportunity, but always try. And if you're in a situation where this is the only instructor that teaches a class and it might not be a good fit, talk to the faculty person. Say, hey, I'm looking for this. Is there any way I can take the lectures? I tell students if you need to have more documentation, ask your instructor. We've all got smartphones or Apple phones. If they permit you to do this, take a picture of the screen. If there's no Canvas notes or things that can be shared, take a picture of the board, whatever it takes. But be proactive in that. The more senses that you use and the more methods you involve in your studying are going to help you remember more information, because you're not going to approach a composition class like you would an electrical engineering class. You're going to do things differently in an organic chemistry class than you would a journalism class. You've got things that you have to do, so the more data you have to pull from, you'll know when to make your adjustment. And then this is when I said earlier on, usually we're more than one style. This is going to be when you're going to make those adjustments, because you're going to have your repertoire and it's like, okay, I need to take this approach. I need to take this approach. You're going to make that adjustment. Kathy? Okay, well, just a few more things before we end today. And I should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about tactile learners. Tactile learners tend sometimes to struggle a little bit more in the classroom because with them being the hands-on learners and not necessarily the best fit for the visual or the auditory, which are the two primary ways of lectures and classroom work being presented, you can kind of see if they're struggling. And if a student is telling you, I'm not getting this, maybe help them see if they are a tactile learner. Maybe that getting them some resources might help them figure out ways of, okay, I learn like this, but I'm not getting the best exposure here. So what do I need to do to adjust my own style? A lot of this is taking control and knowing what kind of a learner you are, being able to see, I need to get some help. I need to make adjustments. I need to talk to my faculty person, or I need to talk to the students in the class that I'm teaching, whatever it takes, but it's an assessment process. I've given you some resources in today's presentation. Please utilize those. I have a big wealth of information that I can share with you. If you need any additional assistance with this, you can contact either Judy or Kathy. You can definitely contact me. My information will be provided to you. Just let us know. It all comes down to it. Let us know if you want someone to come to your class and maybe have them do the assessment to help them learn about what their learning style is. I gladly would like to come in and help you do this because, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, having to learn how to do things in the virtual environment has really just upended the whole educational process. So what can we do to best level things right now and make it an environment that everyone is going to benefit from? Faculty are not, you don't get trained on how to do virtual lectures, virtual classes in graduate school. We're not a virtual campus. We've always done the hands-on classroom, interactive. So how do we make these adjustments? You've got colleagues across campus that are really into wanting to help you do this. So let us know what we can do. And if you're going through and you find something that fits a learning style discussion and you'd like to share it with us, please let us know, because that's how all this information comes together. The partnership that we have with you as students, as faculty members, as staff members, is critical for us to do what we need to do. So we really appreciate you supporting us. And I thank you. Kathy, do we have any questions?
Not at this time, and I did post both links in the Q&A, and we will also provide this information on the Disability Services website, the slides and the links, so everyone can get it there, and the video will be there by the end of the week.
Wonderful. Well then, without any further ado, if anyone has any other comments, if not, I thank you again on behalf of Tutoring Services.
Yep, and Disability Services for joining us today. And just always know you can reach out to either office if you need anything. All right, everyone, have a great day.